When you think of the key elements of grime, yeah, what do you mainly think of? Let me just start naming some examples. First thing that comes to mind, you got 140 BPM, fast, rapid. If you wanted to take it to a different direction, then you probably go aggressive, raw, mean, uncouth. You could say direct, you could say witty in some cases, you could say pragmatic, stuff like that. There's so many different ways to describe the genre's essence. But you see eccentricity and that ability to be a bit more unorthodox. That's a very underrated quality to have. And I think in most cases it's always going to be a positive for an MC in grime, no matter how bizarre that uniqueness may be.
There is a reason why MCs such as Fleur D consistently command the attention of crowds. They came up in an era where fans and even MCs had never even seen your face before, but they would know your voice. They would compete on sets or making the most of the opportunity when the mic was passed to them in a rave. Presence was so vital.
What's quite common is that the trailblazers within this particular aspect never really get that credit or publicity for their works or contributions, despite their impact being as important as those who tend to be the faces of the sound. And you could argue that is probably the case for President T. He definitely fits the bill for talking about someone who shapes their musicality on standing out and being a lot more distinguishable from other MCs, and is slightly underrated as well. His personal style took years of development, exploring different sounds and veering into different musical scenes across the country. And on top of that,
being a core part of arguably one of the most prolific grime crews in history in an area of London that wasn't the grime stronghold that East London was at the time is genuinely impressive.
His interesting journey helped him cultivate such a dynamic, amusing style of MCing that we kind of want to dissect a little bit in this vid, as well as revisiting some of his key moments as an artist, showing why a history of grime can't really be told without him being mentioned.
So without much further ado, introducing the only president that matters, President T. After being born in Birmingham, he moved to North London, specifically Tottenham, as a child with his two brothers, Big H and Paper Babs.
Growing up, he was someone who was just naturally around music all the time. He had a father who was a Caribbean MC, and he had a mother who was a singer. He was introduced to MCing via his friend's brother, who was called Terry Collins, and had a pirate radio station that mainly played drum and bass via the mid to late 90s. He was intrigued by the sounds that he would hear whilst at the radio station playing video games in the front room, and eventually over time gained the courage to actually go to the garage and give it a go on the mic.
It was here where he would start to learn the skills and essentials for MCing: crowd control, composure, flows, catching the beat in the right places, stage presence, that were all very essential to being a jungle MC.
With him now getting to a stage where he's performing at events with blaring sound systems and crowds with so much energy, he had to develop a commanding voice which captivated and controlled the crowd, and also had to think of a name that stuck in the minds of those who attended.
Whilst it's well known that President T spent time in Manchester, it's not quite as well known that he joined a crew called Dark Side with D-Day PH1, Nova, Black Tiger, Miss Shotter and Cautious whilst he was studying at university there. This is where he starts to hone his unique qualities that we know today. This is mostly because the footage of him rapping in those days is hard to find, but we did some digging. We found recordings of the sets from his time as a part of Dark Side, and we were genuinely intrigued at what we found. What immediately struck me is how even with President T, you can hear that the garage era at the time from 2001 and 2003 was the foundation that grime MCs built off. Likely because it was very normal for grime MCs to spit on what was known as dark garage back then, because the grime sound hadn't fully cultivated yet.
Wind that clock, I come to control. Watch everybody with a flame flow. When I back jack, get cap in the toe. Not for them youth that come to blow, oh. Not for them gal when I bend and I blow. If I don't see though, you gotta work on the roll. Hard not life, oh, do you really know? London's fast and the country's slow. When I throw names like whoa. Wanna beg friend when you see me at the show. If you can't take war, better chill out below. Tottenham and Edo, bro, just get out. In Tottenham and Edo, gotta have dough. What you need the next man for? Take a man's belly for a bag of eye Joe. Whether see me high or low, it's the Dark Side show.
Other examples where you start to see President T develop that sense for his trademark flow are on other Dark Side songs such as Champ Team and That's Great.
Let's read between the lines for a second. Generally, the average rapper keeps their lyrics between the first and the fourth bar, or the first and the eighth. It's a nice, regular, consistent pattern. Each line between those bars so it doesn't bleed over, and you'll pause and take a breath on the fourth or the eighth bar, and that starts again in terms of how people structure 8 or 16 bars.
If there were by any chance any Americans watching, which would be quite a surprise, a big reason we rap the way that we do is because even at high BPMs, we still rap within double time. But President T throws that rule completely out the window.
If you put the song I'm about to play you on a musical score, for example, 8-bar musical score, you'll see the irregularity, how sometimes he'll spit between the first and the 6th bar, and then he'll pause on the 7th and then drop the next lyric on the 8th instead of the first of the next bar, so it bleeds over. He'll keep that going, holding that unorthodox flow, and then at some point he'll go for a shorter lyric in a way that's a bit more choppy, and then spit a longer lyric on the 8th and pick it back off of the 1, so it's in a regular flow that you're used to again.
Take off me, nah, must be a dream. Give cats the food, must be a fiend. I said, there's not an MC that could get to my level of stripes. I was like, almost the level of snipes. Be a Mercedes, y'all got types. I got an African friend who said, y'all got swipes. What's he gonna get? Pair of Nikes. I wanna send for the that I bought off a pair of. When trouble ignites, I know man that are scared of heights. That'll skip to the side and lock off your lights. Kid off, Khalid. Stranger returns. Presidency excites.
He also likes to change where he puts the sudden pauses within his flow, constantly catching you by surprise. It may be offbeat sometimes, but it's never out of time. That's kind of the science behind that jagged flow that he's got that's quite peculiar to some, but also adds to him being that much more compelling as an MC.
Was Prez T probably thinking about any of this? Of course not. It was just experimentation that led to something unique. Was this nerdy over explanation of how rapping offbeat works even remotely necessary? No. It probably wasn't. Did I enjoy listening to the same verse over and over again for about 5 to 10 minutes just to figure this out? Yes. Am I going to do more stuff like this in the future? Yes. Honestly, you're going to have to just get used to it. It's kind of what we do in this channel. I mean, if you enjoy it, you can subscribe for more and we can continue. I'm just saying.
Eventually he returned to North London and joined the collective Meridian, a notable grime crew which comprised of his friends, cousins and his brothers, named based off of the estate that they all grew up on, being Meridian Walk. This crew consisted of Skepta, JME, Big H, Bossman Birdie, Paper Pabs and of course President T.
They associated with other crews like Cold Blooded, Disturbed Mandem representing North London, at a point where East London dominated at the time. But they made a bigger name for themselves, tearing up sets on Axe FM, Rinse FM, Kiss FM and Deja Vu, making a big break on Young Man Standing and Practice Hours DVDs. It's here when President T really perfects what makes him the MC that he is. The chaotic coordination of his flow is almost seamless, and now he's able to use tone and projection as he wishes alongside it.
However, as for his collective, after a series of unfortunate events including the Meridian Walk incident, Meridian crew was split up, which would then lead to the forming of Meridian Bloodline, later shortened to Bloodline in 2005. Now in 2006, the Practice Hours 2 DVD dropped and Bloodline will make an appearance and have their own set of freestyles, and this would be the period where they'd get their first bit of buzz. And after President T done his freestyle, this would have many people anticipating his debut mixtape release, and eventually in 2008 they would get that.
He would finally deliver what would be known as his best piece of work to date and widely considered to be one of the greatest grime projects of all time. This is Back in My Face Volume 1. Boy Better Know is featured on here, and whilst the split still did happen, the disagreements between the camps were mostly settled and they continued working together on many songs past this point, including some of President T's biggest commercial successes, which we'll get onto later. Whilst it does have a lot of radio bars on here, he proves he's more than capable of turning them into well-crafted songs with good song structure that you can enjoy from start to finish. It's not just a sequence of freestyles. Best kind of example is the fan favorite Kill Off Khalid Part 2.
Tolerance zero. Well, for hit zero. Step in the shop, they can't afford aero. They watch too much De Niro. Now it's funny out when he walks streets.
The opening verse is an instant wheel up in any grime rave for good reason, especially that first 16. The animated voice, the flow, the well executed humor. Every time I bump this album, I find myself laughing at least twice per song. In this case, the comedic timing of the lyric about a black R-type that has me in stitches every time.
Love for these youths, love and run with a hype. Said your dad's got a black R-type. Hey prison, why are you driving my dad's black R-type? Know how it is, some of them get on the pipe.
The dubstep adjacent production of the traps like What You Gonna Do, or the less energetic beats like This Look at You or Concrete Respect, which give a lot of variance. He has a great knack for hooks across the whole tape, and he even has some brave experimental tracks with James Morrison titled This Boy Wants to Play. I'll round out my thoughts on this album with my favorite song from it and a hot take. President T has the best vocal on Rhythm and Gash of all time. No, I will die on this hill because I will fight tooth and nail with every single one of you in the comments, and whilst you might give me a little bit of trouble, nah, I'd win. Yeah, he has the best one. I will fight you to the death.
Going into the 2010s, whilst it may not seem like a major difference, President T decided to take it up a notch when it came to his delivery. Where in his early years, the flows were slightly more straightforward and the energy was consistently at an optimum. Having got some years under his belt, this is now something that he wanted to experiment and tamper with a bit more. An evolution took place. His voice upheld a much darker tone, which sounded a lot more assertive and composed, which led to him sounding a lot more militant, which was kind of fitting given his name. A lot of the techniques mentioned by Ed and I earlier, where the rhyme schemes and the patterns and flow become increasingly abnormal, it becomes a lot more apparent when we reach this decade because he just starts simply taking the piss. Mick. I meant to say Mick.
I know man who's 6'8" and claims to be real. Then left so much scars on his face, even the son of God failed to heal back in the day when chips and cod was a meal. Sorry, I was in West. What was my name? Stone Flakes. Yeah, I had food, but I was cakes.
That little act of suspense and being sudden when closing out his bars was another unique feature that he added, which really singled him out from other MCs, considering, well, not many other MCs were doing it. Whilst he wouldn't drop another project post Back in My Face for roughly another 7 years, aside from a little EP that he done with Jordan Sefton named North of the Water in 2012, he'd still be present on freestyle platforms and sets where he'd showcase that he was very much still at the top of his game. One of the more notable freestyle appearances for me was the Bloodline set on Kiss FM in 2012 with Logan Sama, where President T and Big H as well were just really showing the levels. I think that was one of President T's most strongest showings as an MC, because I don't know what was going on that day. He just lost his mind, bro.
Can't see him on the wing, but I did see him blazing the ting. Cracked out pipe in the doors when he MCs. Now and again, I get a little man pause. I was in East when I had boxes, sold him little man drawers. He's only ever took part in little man wars. I was in the East when I had boxes, sold him plenty of stones. Yeah. He on the wing. I've got plenty of clones, but I don't mean I won't run through plenty of homes. Oh, I forgot. This little pleb ain't got one. If he did, get all clean. I'll be there in a hot one, waving a shotgun.
At the end of that set, he would tease the release of Stranger Returns to be dropping soon, a highly anticipated album that everyone at the time was waiting on, but that didn't actually drop till 6 years later on from that particular moment. However, he did drop something in 2015 which he stated was to get people prepared for Stranger Returns. He dropped a tape, The Greatest Ever Touchdown, which was quite diverse sonically, mainly specialized within providing that championship music as he describes it, especially with songs like Never Had Problems or King of Grime, where those rich horn sounds provide that victorious, triumphant, heroic kind of feeling.
This album shows that he can still do his thing on modern grime production, with a reimagining of Kill of Khalid as Rave Ready, his flow that is still immaculate on songs like When I Come Through, with a great feature from Bossman Birdie and Meridian Dan. Still has a great knack for hooks on songs like Gunshot Sound and Level and Stripes, with a sneaky diss with Trim on the first verse.
More on the hooks though, because on this tape they felt a lot more quirky than usual, particularly on songs like Everybody Looks, where he had the unconventional chorus and paired it with some eerie sci-fi synths that intro the song and helped to just create a very unsettling atmosphere.
Everybody look, I said this is the hook. Might get chased by feds and when I went caught, they threw the book. I'm a gourmet in this game, you're just a hook. 20% off man upgrade, 80% off shook. I was already taken, they were like, look what he took.
He even keeps the tradition of having one experimental track with the abstract garage track War with Fred Wave. There's also a nice little ode to the old days of Meridian with Day That I Die. It very much feels reminiscent of Back in My Face Volume 1.
He then dropped Tea on the Wing in 2016 after recently getting released, and with this album it had a specific tone to it, like he really had a point to prove. Here he addressed a lot of the uncertainty over his career in grime, given his inconsistencies, and thought, what better way to respond to this than to lean even more into that conceited, boastful version of himself and have the sonics to match it. And with no hesitation got back to his usual belittling of other MCs and emphasizing how no one's on his level, and even touching on how some rappers are not living their rhymes. Menacing grime beats paired with heavy trap beats with bass lines and synths just bouncing all over the gaff and make up the general body of this album and make for his most hard-hitting album in my book. This was then followed up by the highly anticipated release of Stranger Returns that finally dropped in 2018. Kind of similar to his previous albums in terms of the kind of content that was included and the tone. However, there was a lot more focus on his tenure within grime and how integral he is to the genre's foundation. It's a very intense album. A lot of the songs sound very major and veer into all different areas of Prez's musical palette: grime, dubstep, even a little bit of drill. It's also the project where he delves the most into that conversational aspect of his rapping style, with a lot of those back and forth call and response kind of convos, questions from potentially in real life discussions implemented into the music. There are also albums such as There's Only One and Passing the Bill, both released in 2018 and 2019 respectively, which are both projects that contain a lot more modern production away from the prototypical grime that we're used to hearing him on. But both projects go to show that President T's unique formula in terms of the delivery and the flow that he's cultivated for himself can still thrive and not look out of place when the general music standard has actually changed. It also just contains some of my underrated President T tunes. Like, I think Where You Going From, There's Only One is, you know, super under the radar. Like, that's a very good track.
Where you going? Don't really know. Maybe I've already been. Yeah, are you sure? Said he was more than keen. Depends what you want. I don't really know. Maybe I've already gone. And when I die, call me a don. I don't really know. Taking a step in life. Where's where you going?
It's actually one of his more introspective songs that he doesn't get that much credit for, considering this isn't really of his nature, but at the same time, it's interesting because he's vividly showing how thankful he is for his career and the fans that have supported him, but he's also a bit unsure in terms of whether he wants to continue it and what there is left of it, which I think is actually a lot more understandable considering how long he's been in the game for and how difficult it can be to balance music with family and business and bare different other factors. I will say though, after having listened to everything and going through his whole discography, I feel like I could understand why some people may have some concerns with the amount of commitment to the similar song structure. In terms of the structure usually being 16 bars chorus, 16 bars chorus, or chorus, 16 bars chorus, 16 bars chorus, and that kind of feeling a bit limiting to the kind of range that he can show as a musician. Original recording kind of messed up, so I had to step in. Please forgive me for the light that is present. Sorry for this. But yeah, essentially it would have been cool for there to have been a bit more variety within the song structures, for some of the verses to have had maybe 32 or 64 bars as opposed to the 16 that we're used to, just to add to the whole unpredictability factor that he already possesses within his intrinsic qualities as an MC. But the thing is, it's a possible downside that you can forgive or bypass because of what he does within this rigid structure that he follows. Because where else are you going to find that unique cadence and bar setup and wordplay and flow? Exactly. Anyways, back to the original recording.
Whilst he's never quite seen the commercial successes of Skepta, for example, he's had some great mainstream successes with big features on his verse on Big H's Side by Side, Gets His Pick Up the Phone, and Skepta's That's Not Me remix, as well as a single that ended up as one of his albums called House and Pop with JME. So he has had that, and a lot of them are big grime hits that get spun in grime raves till this day. Not just stuff from Back in My Face Volume 1, he has had modern commercial success.
Even with his last project release being in 2019, he still is very active within the scene, featuring on the odd set here and there on Rinse FM, or even featuring on new platforms such as the Station 20 Double Series. He's surprisingly still going strong doing live performances, even collaborating with the Metal Messiah last May at an event at Village Underground. Whilst according to him, apparently he's at a stage where he's not recording any new music. Don't know how true that is, but... And even though his commitment has been questioned over the duration of his career, I don't really think it is something that should be questioned. Given his involvement in live performances, dropping the odd single here and there, and even hopping on remixes to help platform other emerging artists in the space, that dedication to the space and the sound itself is still very much present. Despite not having as much mainstream presence or as much stardom as some other artists, I would say that President T is an MC who understands the value of creating your own lane and becoming the master of a craft that only you can execute. Through having quite a nomadic journey with his ventures across the country and embracing the mindset of always evolving his sound, never trying to box himself, he's managed to mold his own distinct flow that is as electrifying and militant as it is rhythmic, and as a whole, plain out iconic.
President T is a good example of what the essence of UK grime is. Unique flows, presence and composure on the mic, partnered with a commanding tone and truckloads of wit and charisma. His legacy is undeniable. Some may question his impact by arguing that no one's really tried to emulate his style or being inspired by President T. And I think that's simply because he's such a one-of-a-kind MC, it's next to impossible to pull that off. After all, there is only one president.